Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Let's just give colleagues the chance to join. Many thanks. Okay, let's get started, and I'm confident more people will be joining as we proceed. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to those joining us from around the world, and Ramadan Kareem to everyone observing the holy month. And thank you for joining us today in this Ramadan conversation on humanitarian needs, where inshallah we will focus on the situation and the response in Sudan, Afghanistan, the occupied Palestinian territories, and Yemen. Before we begin, colleagues, allow me to share perhaps a few housekeeping points. We will have speakers today who are going to make their interventions in Turkish and Arabic, of course, as well as in English. You can select your preferred language by clicking on the globe at the bottom of your screen, where you can choose again the language, your preferred language, to be hearing the conversation. Second point of order is around the questions and answers session, the discussion session. Please use the Q&A function to share your questions. And if you see a question that is already in this function that you would like addressed, please do vote for it so that you will help us also consolidate the questions as we channel it to the different panelists. And finally, for your information, this webinar is being recorded. I'm pleased today to be joined by an extremely distinguished panel who will speak to us about how timely funding ultimately translates into life-saving assistance and protection on the front lines. You would have seen, of course, the list of panelists. I'm very honored to be joined today by Mr. Haluk Levent, who is a Turkish singer and philanthropist. We're also joined by Ms. Shaza Ahmed, who is the Executive Director of Nada Al-Azhar in Sudan. We're joined by Dr. Razi Khan Hamdard, who is the Executive Director of Health, Disability and Development in Afghanistan. By Ms. Hanadi Mubarak, who is the Program Manager at Man Development Center in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, and also by Mr. Mohanna Eljabaly, who is the General Manager of the Yemen Family Care Association. Welcome, colleagues, and really a pleasure to have you today on this important webinar. Colleagues and distinguished guests, we are here today around a shared conviction that in moments of hardship, solidarity must reach faster and act faster, especially during a month that calls us to compassion and generosity. The needs that we will discuss today are urgent, and the voices we will hear are those delivering assistance on the front lines, often under extraordinary constraints. You would all have been a part of or have seen the Global Humanitarian Overview, which was launched in December of last year, where you can see that nearly 300 million people around the world require humanitarian assistance and protection. Colleagues, this is the highest number ever recorded. As we all know, behind the numbers are families trying to stay safe, healthy, and hold on to dignity. And in the spirit of this month, we are meeting today to put the spotlight on the humanitarian response efforts in contexts where millions of people continue to face tremendous hardship. Our objective today is to hear directly from frontline organizations, to highlight the impact of humanitarian pooled funds, and to look at how collective action during this holy month can help sustain life-saving response. Delivering assistance that is timely, principled, and locally driven is central to this effort, and that is exactly what the OCHA-managed humanitarian funds are designed to support. A bit of background on the humanitarian funds for your information. Essentially, they pool contributions into a single flexible mechanism. They are managed by OCHA under the leadership of the humanitarian coordinator in country so that resources can be allocated quickly to the highest priority needs through national and local partners, through NGOs, and through UN agencies. Many partners online and beyond are also funding UN agencies and NGOs directly, which is absolutely critical and necessary. It is important to note that the pooled funds are an additional way, it's complementary to channel support quickly, flexibly, and based on agreed priorities to those same responders. So we're all complementing each other's efforts, and the pooled funds is one channel to ensure that the resources reach those who need it most as fast as possible. And there are many reasons why partners choose to invest in the humanitarian funds, and I'll highlight a few of these. First, they are needs-driven, so funding is directed to the most urgent priorities identified on the ground. Secondly, they offer strong assurance and value for money, so donors benefit from a shared system of due diligence, risk management, and results monitoring with clear reporting. So this helps maximize impact and accountability. And thirdly, they strengthen local leadership. In 2025, more than 50%, as a matter of fact, it's 55%, of the allocations from the OCHA managed pool funds were directly channeled to national and local organizations. So enabling those closest to affected communities to deliver faster and more relevant support. But as we all know, colleagues and distinguished guests, numbers only tell part of the story. The real story is what happens when those resources reach people who need them most as fast as possible. Today, you will hear directly from those turning the support into real life-saving assistance for people in crisis. Before we hear from our frontline partners, I'm really honored to be joined today and to introduce someone whose personal commitment to solidarity reflects the spirit of this event. Mr. Haluk Levent is a Turkish rock musician, singer, and philanthropist. Ahlan Haluk, lovely to see you online, and thank you again for joining us. He's known for his Anatolian rock style and has released more than 20 albums, and he was recognized by Time magazine as one of the world's 100 most influential people in 2023. He is also the founder of Ahbab charity organization, which has mobilized significant support in response to disasters. And he recently made a generous contribution from the proceeds of his concerts to the Humanitarian Fund for the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Many thanks again, Haluk, for your contribution and for your humanitarian work. And again, a million thanks for joining us today. Grateful to have you, and over to you to better understand what motivated you to make this contribution through the OCHA managed pool funds. Thank you.
Evet, teşekkür ederim. Tüm dostlarıma buradan sevgilerimi iletiyorum. Ee, Uça'nın e, Uça ile birlikte bir organizasyona girdik. Bir gönüllü organizasyonuna girdik. Kalben girdik. Buradaki konserden elde edilen gelir olan 110 bin doların hiçbir anlamı yok. Yani rakam olarak pek bir anlamı yok. Ama bütün dünyaya şunu iletmek istedik. E, işgal altındaki Gazze'de bu çocuklar, bu insanlar bizim insanımız. Tarih bundan 20 yıl sonra, 30 yıl sonra çok farklı bahsedecek. Belki konjonktür gereği çok fazla bahsedilmiyor ama 30 yıl sonra torunlarımız, çocuklarımız bizden hesap soracak. Diyecek ki siz ne yaptınız? Nasıl ki Hitler Almanya'sında, Nazi Almanya'sında, nasıl ki o e, Yahudilerin, o gariban insanların, o çocukların e, gaz odalarına gönderilmeleri, nasıl ki 30 yıl sonra bütün dünya tarafından biz niye sustuk denildiyse, bugün aynı mağduriyeti yaşayan bu insanların torunları maalesef politika gereği de olabilir, siyasi gerek de olabilir, başka insanların çocuklarına zulmediyorlar ve orantısız güç kullanıyorlar. Bizler bu savaşın bitmesini istedik, yıllarca bağırdık, çağırdık, koşturduk. Ama elimizden pek fazla bir şey gelmedi. Fakat 30 yıl sonra, 40 yıl sonra yine Birleşmiş Milletler olacak. Haluk Levent olmasa da çocuğu olacak, torunu olacak. Hepimizin torunları olacak ve bize diyecekler, siz neden karşı çıkmadınız? Bugünkü karşı çıkış bir misyondur, bir tarihsel misyondur. Dünyaya, insanlığa, zulme bir tarihsel misyondur. Şu anda susmamak gerekiyor. Elimizden ne geliyorsa yapmak gerekiyor. İşte Uçan'ın da beraber gönüllü organizasyonuyla ben 2 konserimi bağışladım. Belki bundan sonraki birçok konserimi de bağışlayacağım. Oradaki küçücük bir çocuğun hele bu Ramazan ayında küçücük bir su içmesi beni derinden çok mutlu edecek. İnsan olduğumu daha da fazla hissedeceğim. Bu nedenle ben bütün dünyaya buradan sesleniyorum. Yani elimizden ne geliyorsa yapalım demek illaki yardım yapmak değildir. Bir ressam elindeki fırçayla bir şeyler çizsin, Gazze'yi anlatsın, Afrika'yı anlatsın, başka yeri anlatsın. Bir müzisyen elinde bir gitarıyla bir şarkı söylesin. Bir işçi bir tuğla koysun, bir tuğlayı bir daha koysun. Bunu Gazze için koyuyorum desin. Her şey tabii ki yardım etmek sadece para yollamak demek değil. Düşünsel anlamda onların yanında olduğunu hissetmek de çok önemli. Ben bunu söylüyorum. Bundan sonra da bu tür çalışmaların içerisinde olacağım. Teşekkür ediyorum. Eğer bir sorusu olan varsa.
Many thanks, Haluk, and not only for your contribution, but also for your call to action, for solidarity, for those in need of support across the globe, but also, of course, particularly in the occupied Palestinian territory in Gaza. And also underscoring that it's not just about financial resources. Financial resources are absolutely important and necessary. But as you mentioned, it's also the in-kind support that is equally important. So thank you again for making that call and for all of your support to date and also your offer of support moving forward in the future. We will have the chance, of course, in the Q&A session to direct questions to you, Haluk. I hope you'll be able to stay with us until then. If not, it is understandable because I know you'll have to leave probably in the next 30 minutes. Now, I'd like to turn now to our frontline colleagues who, as I mentioned earlier, translate resources into real life-saving assistance for people in crisis every day. Each speaker will have the opportunity to share how the humanitarian funds has enabled them to respond quickly and effectively to urgent needs, thanks to the support of member states and also of companies, foundations, and individuals. It's only possible because of these important contributions that the different stakeholders make in support of the response. So I'd first like to turn to Shaza. So Ms. Shaza Ahmed, who is connecting from Sudan. She is the executive director of the NGO Nada Al-Azhar for disaster prevention and sustainable development. With over 20 years of experience across national NGOs and the United Nations in Sudan and the DRC, she specializes in victim assistance, disability, inclusion, gender, and mine action. She represents NGOs on the Sudan Humanitarian Fund Advisor Group because all of our country-based pool funds, the OCHA managed country-based pool funds, have advisor groups that are established at the country level, and they're made up of different stakeholders, primarily local NGOs, to determine the overall holistically what are the humanitarian needs on the ground, and jointly that advisor group, which is headed by the humanitarian coordinator, determine what are the needs that need to be addressed. And she has spoken at major global forums and is advocating for women and locally led organizations in Sudan. With that, over to you, dear Shaza.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, the connection does not seem to be working well.
Much, and I think the connectivity is very in a position to put my video on because connection. Because the connectivity is very poor, so I might not be in a position to put my video on. So I'm sorry for that. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Nada Al-Azhar, our organization, is a humanitarian national and women-led organization that is specialized in frontline emergency protection services. While working in a very challenging situation, with Sudan facing a severe conflict, which results in one of the biggest displacement crises. Sudan is facing one of the worst humanitarian crises. The conflict has displaced a third of the population, and 30 million people need assistance. More than half the country face acute food insecurity. In the hardest hit areas, fewer than a quarter of health facilities are functioning. Diseases cycle one after another: cholera, dengue fever, malaria, without pause. Protection of civilians has completely collapsed. Infrastructure is destroyed, and explosive hazard contaminated large areas. We know thousands of women and girls held in inhuman conditions in which they are subject to sexual violence and at risk of sexual slavery. Women and girls are suffering the most. Nearly half of the gender-based violence survivors are children. This statistic should shock you, but it shouldn't allow you to ignore the humanity of each and every person it represents. Behind that statistics are real lives, like a 13-year-old girl, displaced and disabled, facing severe hunger without access to health, legal, and psychological care. After being raped, she now has a child who cannot be officially registered simply because the father is unknown, which means that child will not have access to basic services like health or education. These are not isolated cases. Despite many challenges, insecurity, restricted access, and limited funding, humanitarian actors, including women-led organizations like our organization, continue to work. Sudan Humanitarian Fund have been very crucial for us. It provides rapid emergency funding, including a 48 response window, supports hard-to-reach areas, and allow flexible area-based allocations. These mechanisms help ensure assistance reach those who need it most. Thanks to the Sudan Humanitarian Fund, covering half of our projects, Nada Al-Azhar has reached around 500,000 survivors and at-risk individuals with specialized protection services, including gender-based violence, child protection, and mine action services since the war erupted in Sudan in April 2023. We work with thousands of women and girls living with unwanted pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases from rape, thousands of traumatized women and children who have attended to end their own lives due to the psychological disturbance. About 8% of the people we support are persons with disabilities. We prioritize inclusive programming. We provide clinical care for rape survivors, case management, referral to legal and health services. Mental health and psychosocial support is a very core in our response. Family reunification for unaccompanied and separated children is a mandatory for all our teams at hard-to-reach areas. And ensuring access to cash is one of the fundamental and very instrumental activities that we are now doing. NADA managed to provide thousands of women and girls with personal hygiene kits and dignity kits to women and girls on the first days of displacement. Those vulnerable women are pushed to travel long distance, walking without any support, even a piece of cloth. We are one of the few NGOs, and sometimes the only NGOs who provide mental health and psychosocial support at hard-to-reach areas. Prevention is just as important as response. So capacity building, raising awareness of local communities and service providers, including government authorities, were timely delivered. This results in raising the profile of the protection in Sudan of women, children, internally displaced people, refugees, and persons with disabilities rights. Through our Sudan Humanitarian Fund projects, our teams manage to enhance the capacity of decision makers, which assist in creating access to services by vulnerable people. One of the outstanding achievements, which is I personally very proud of, was seeing survivors of sexual violence secure justice, with perpetrators sentenced to 20 years in prison. This not only contributed to justice, but also to prevention from having similar abuse. Nada al-Azhar work enrooted in community engagement, which is key to our success. During Ramadan, communities actively support those in need through donation, peer assistance, and in-kind aid. The holy month often brings a temporary slowdown in fighting, allowing us to access people in need in remote and hard-to-reach areas. We wait for Ramadan because it contributes to the safety of our staff, as the parties and warring parties are under spiritual, spiritual changes, which we hope that it can contribute to the stopping of the war in my country. Sudan Humanitarian Fund is very essential to make this possible. In Sudan, the Humanitarian Fund has been proving a strong partner, providing fast, flexible funding, prioritizing protection, supporting national NGOs, quick access to resources, combined with the trust on us as a local actors, had made a critical difference in delivering timely and effective assistance. I thank you.
Shaza, a million thank you for very genuinely and very clearly really laying out what the situation and the plight of women and girls and the plight of persons with disabilities also are in Sudan. And thank you for all the work that you're doing, that other critical local organizations and women-led organizations are doing. And equally as importantly, also, as you've mentioned, it is the communities that are at the front line of the response. And especially during this holy month of Ramadan, with the hope that there will be calm, not just during Ramadan, but beyond. But it is this breathing space where more assistance would be possible. With thanks again to communities, your work, Shaza, as well as again the contributions of colleagues and online and beyond that are enabling this very, very quick response to happen during this period. Many thanks again, Shaza, and for the sobering account also around gender-based violence. And it's shocking, really shocking to hear that 50% of gender-based violence cases are children. Important to shed light on the realities on the ground and the important work that you're doing to help prevent and address these horrible situations. Thanks again, Shaza. And with that, I'd like to turn to Dr. Razi. So Dr. Razi is the Executive Director of the Health, Disability and Development Organization in Afghanistan. He brings 34 years of leadership in humanitarian development and governmental sectors across Afghanistan's most challenging and insecure regions. He served as regional advisor for South Asia's community-based rehabilitation network and is the country coordinator for South Asia and Asia-Pacific community-based rehabilitation networks. Over to you, Dr. Razi.
Thank you very much. I'm audible? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Loud and clear, yes.
Thank you again for giving me opportunity to provide, my information in what I want to share with all those are online and with you. As you all know that Afghanistan has been affected by continuous conflict in war for nearly 45 years. In 2026, an estimated 21.9 million people, approximately 45% of the country's population, will require humanitarian assistance. Humanitarian conditions continue to be driven by worsening food insecurity due to climate-induced drought, large-scale influx of returnees from Pakistan and from Iran, frequent earthquake. You may hear that we had 2 very severe earthquakes this year in Afghanistan, killed more than 5,000 and injured more than 100,000. Flooding is there, multiple diseases outbreaks, severe protection risk, particularly for women and girls. In 2026, 17.4 million people are projected to face acute food securities, including 4.7 million in emergency phases. Protection risks remain acute and are expected to intensify due to the enforcement of existence restrictions on women and girls by the de facto authorities in the introductions of new law and order. Underground mines alongside persistence of explosive ordnance contamination, gender-based violence, child labor, and early marriage are the important protection risks in Afghanistan. On average, around 50 people are killed or injured each month by explosive ordnance in Afghanistan. More than 2.6 million Afghans returned from Iran and Pakistan only in 2025. Persons with disability remain among the most affected group in Afghanistan. Prevalence rate is 14.8 severe disabilities with limited disability definitions among the population in need of humanitarian assistance, physical rehabilitation, and inclusion. Maternal mortality rate in Afghanistan is 638 deaths per 100,000 live birth. Normally, globally is 112. So now you can see how huge this ratio is there. Under such a terrible circumstances, what the full fund play a role here in our countries. In today's crisis marked by economic decline, climate shocks, displacements, and access challenges, full funds are essentials. They provide flexible funding that adapt to changing needs, keep frontline services running when other funds stop, and allow rapid response to earthquake, flood, drought, and new waves of displacement. They also ensure support rich, hard-to-reach area or unreached population in the country. Operationally, full funds are fast, coordinated, and gap-focused financial tools that enable timely and targeted humanitarian actions. The organization that I'm leading, the Health, Disability, and Development Organization, HDDO, as a partner of the Afghan Humanitarian Fund, AHF, supported only in 2025, 300 households with in-kind food assistance and cash, and also provided physical rehabilitation, psychosocial support, and also other inclusion services to persons with disabilities. 50% of whom were women and girls delivered life-saving and essential humanitarian services to those most in need. One human story, I want to share it with you here. 9-year-old Inamullah lost his leg in a landmine explosion in Baghlan province, north of Afghanistan, and sustained a severe fractures in his left leg. Following the incidents, he was unable to return to school due to his loss of mobility and became fully dependent on his family. Tragically, he also lost his father. After years without adequate support, the HDDU community mobilizers identified him and referred him to the organization's physical rehabilitation center. Through physiotherapy, psychosocial support, and the provision of a prosthetic leg and orthosis, funded by OCHA AHF, he gradually regained his mobility, confidence, and hope for the future. His story highlights the urgent need for rehabilitation, empowerment, and inclusion services in Afghanistan, where many persons with disability lack access to essential care and support. Through this project, HDDU has helped restore mobility, dignity, and opportunity for children like Inamullah, enabling them to reintegrate into their families and communities with greater confidence and independence. Request. Now I want to have a request. As a director of the Health, Disability, and Development Organization, HDDU, a national non-governmental organization, and a partner of the Afghanistan Humanitarian Fund, managed by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, I speak from direct experience. Full funding saves lives. It's transparent, it is accountable, it puts trust in national NGOs, and it allows us to respond quickly, reach the most vulnerable, and serve our people with dignity and responsibility. In Afghanistan's crisis, flexible and coordinated funding is essential. This Ramadan, our collective responsibility is clear. So stand and strengthen full funds and turn solidarity into life-saving action. Thank you very much. Dr. Razi Khan Hamdard, Executive Director of Health, Disability, and Development Organization from Afghanistan. Thank you for listening. Thank you.
Khuda Hafiz, Dr. Razi, and thank you again for all of the great work that you're doing and for your vote of confidence in the country-based pool funds, and for highlighting again, especially with the story that you shared about the lives that are affected and affected positively with the direct funding from partners to the pooled funds directly to local NGOs. Thank you again for your intervention and for also sharing this glimmer of hope with a positive story that you shared. This is one of many stories, and of course, the issue is to make sure that these positive stories are at scale, not sporadic, not a few hundreds that are supported, but thousands and the millions, especially also with the shocking statistic, Dr. Razi, that you mentioned, with 14.8% suffering from severe disability in Afghanistan. Thank you, Dr. Razi. And I'm sure there'll be comments and questions and advice sought from partners online to you as we open for questions.
I will be available.
Thank you, Dr. Razi. Thank you. With that, I'd like to turn to Hanadi. So Ms. Hanadi Mubarak is a program manager at Man Development Center. It's a Palestinian organization with over 37 years of experience supporting affected people and communities across the West Bank and Gaza. Ms. Hanadi helps families affected by conflict to access essential services, restore daily life, and recover after crises. Over to you, please, dear Hanadi.
Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I am Hanadi Mubarak, joining you from the West Bank, and I work with Man Development Center. In my work, I meet families whose life changed suddenly. One day, they have a home, work, and routine. The next day, they are displaced and trying to secure water, warmth, and safety for their children. In these moments, I have seen that the most important factor is not only aid, it is readiness. Through the Humanitarian Fund, particularly in Gaza, we were able to prepare before emergencies happened. The fund supported us in pre-positioning essential items such as blankets, mattresses, pillows, and hygiene supplies, designed to meet the needs of all family members. Because these supplies were ready in advance, our team could begin assistance immediately at the onset of a crisis. Families did not have to wait weeks for help. They received basic items quickly, allowing them to create safer and more dignified temporary living conditions. Funding through the rapid response mechanism was also critical during the first days of emergencies. In Gaza, it enabled us to provide safe drinking water immediately when regular services were disrupted. On the ground, we saw how access to clean water during these first days helped prevent additional hardship and health risks, especially for children. In the West Bank, the same mechanism supported displaced families. Many families arrived at the temporary shelters with almost nothing. Providing blankets, mattresses, pillows, hygiene supplies, cash support, and winter clothing helped them cope with the cold and regain a sense of normal life. I remember one mother telling us, "We left our home suddenly, without taking any clothes or belongings. The voucher assistant allowed me to buy winter clothes for my children during the severe cold, and the cash support helped us cover basic needs." She said it was the first time since displacement that her children felt warm again. For me, this is what humanitarian funding means in practice, not numbers, but relief from daily hardship, warmth for children, clean water to drink, and a place to sleep with dignity. Preparedness and rapid response together create stability during crisis. When support arrives early, families can focus on caring for their children instead of searching for basic necessities. For us as responders, the Humanitarian Fund does more than finance activities. It allows us to act quickly, responsibly, and with dignity for the people we serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hanadi, for also your tremendous work, and also for highlighting, and I believe also earlier speakers have highlighted the importance of dignity, and especially also through the use of cash and the distribution of cash, using cash as a mode of assistance, because it is indeed faster. It provides more dignity to communities to determine what are the urgent humanitarian needs that they need to purchase or obtain, because of course every individual and every family has their own respective needs. And again, so speaking to the importance of cash assistance as one form of assistance that is absolutely welcome, and hence with the country-based pool funds, with the cash assistance that is received through the pool funds, it enables this type of programming to take place. And it is one of the top requests of communities, is not always in terms of shelter and vaccine, but more on cash programming, cash at hand to determine what is it that they need for their children or for themselves or for their larger families. So thank you again, Hanadi, for your remarks. And with that, I'd like to turn to Mohanna. Mohanna is Ms. Mohanna Eljabaly. He joins us from Yemen. Thank you, Mohanna, for joining us, and I hope the connection remains good. Mohanna is the General Manager of the Yemen Family Care Association. He's leading humanitarian and development programs that support vulnerable communities across Yemen, and he focuses on risk-informed programming, partnerships, and strengthening locally led responses. Over to you, please, dear Mohanna.
Thank you, Mervat. And thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak today. Allow me to start with some numbers. In Yemen, 19.5 million people are in need for humanitarian assistance. 15 million out of those are women and children. 4.8 million people are internally displaced, making Yemen the fifth largest internal displacement. 17.1 million, 49% of the Yemeni population, are food insecure, and 55% of those are children under 5, which suffer from chronic malnutrition. 3.2 million are not attending schools, 17 million do not have access to enough water, and the numbers goes on. So Yemen continues to face one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises. And for many communities, access to essential services remain fragile. During Ramadan, we are reminded of compassion and shared responsibility. In Yemen, those values translate into very concrete moments when timely supports make the difference between survival and loss. Let me share 2 brief stories from our work on the ground. The first comes from Al-Dala Governorate. A displaced farmer named Naji arrived at a hospital late at night, suffering from severe chest pain and shortness of breath. He was showing signs of a heart attack. He could not afford private care, and emergency services were not available in that area, especially at night. Because pooled humanitarian funding supported staff, medicines, and emergency readiness, he received immediate care, oxygen, cardiac treatment, and stabilization. Later, he told us, and I quote, "I might be dead by now if I did not receive essential health care on time. I was saved at the last minute." That moment was not only about one patient, it reflected something larger. How humanitarian funding, when it reaches frontline services, can turn fragile systems into life-saving ones. The second story is about a woman named Dikra. She carried the full responsibility of her household. Her husband lives with a disability and could not work. She had accumulated unpaid rent, faced exploitation in informal labor, and experienced deep psychological stress. Through pooled humanitarian support, she received case management, psychological support, and targeted cash assistance. With that assistance, she purchased a knitting machine. Her income doubled. She cleared her rent debt. She accessed medical care. She regained stability. She told us, "I am no longer just surviving, I am thriving." These stories show 2 different dimensions of impact. In one case, funding enabled immediate life-saving intervention. In the other, it enabled recovery, dignity, and economic independence. From our experience on the ground, pooled funding works because it allows frontline national organizations such as the Yemen Family Care Association, those closest to communities, to respond quickly when people need help the most. Hospitals remain operational beyond standard hours. Protection teams can intervene before families fall deeper into crisis. Small, strategic investments create sustainable improvement in people's lives. As we observe Ramadan, a time when generosity reflects our shared humanity, these stories remind us that humanitarian funding is not abstract. It is timely, it is life-saving, and it restores dignity. Behind every allocation, there is a person who survives the night. Thank you. Over to you, Mervat.
Thank you, Mohanna. And again, another sobering account with the statistics that you shared, Mohanna, with regards to the plight of civilians and vulnerable communities in Yemen. 19.5 million people in need, 17 million food insecure, 75% of which are children under the age of 5. and the really sobering and very alarming and very, of course, concerning at many levels. And it gives me hope, and I would hope that it gives hope to the people of Yemen that with the support of organizations such as yourself, and also the contributions that cut through the bureaucracy, through the pooled funds that make it as fast and as directly as possible to important local organizations as yours, there's a glimmer of hope that we can do something about it. And this goes back to the point that Haluk mentioned, which is that call to action that we all have a role to play. Even if we're not at the front line, we all have a role to play. And whether it's with moral support, with our voices, with our financial support, with our in-kind support, we all have a role to play. And again, very promising to hear that from one affected person. You were saying that she said that I'm not just surviving, but I'm thriving. It's really motivating, and again gives us hope and the moral courage to continue to do the work that we're doing. So with that, colleagues and distinguished guests, I would like to really say a big thanks to all of our panelists. To summarize, before we open for questions and responses from our panelists, we heard Haluk, of course, speak to the importance of global solidarity and the call to action, and contributions, financial, yes, in kind, also equally as important. We heard from Shaza in Sudan around the tremendous concerns and the sobering accounts of gender-based violence, and how her organization, as a woman-led organization, the work that they're doing to address some of the needs and the concerns related to gender-based violence and beyond. We heard from Dr. Riza in Afghanistan, including around the plight of persons with disabilities, 14.8% of the population with severe disabilities, and the call for funding. That funding, quote unquote, saves lives. And again, with the pooled funds, it's about trust to national NGOs, and it's about dignity to communities affected by crisis. We heard from Hanadi and OPT around the great work that herself and many of the local NGOs and communities are doing, and also zooming in on the importance of cash assistance. And again, last but not least, the work that Mohanna is doing in Yemen, and the positive, comments from one of the communities, thriving, not just surviving, and all leading to the point of the pooled funds being an important vehicle, complementary to other efforts. Again, important to underscore that provides timely, life-saving support, restores dignity, and equally as important, cuts through the bureaucracy to make sure that funds reach as fast as possible to communities and as much as possible to communities. So I would like to open now for questions from our guests online. But before doing so, I'm actually very happy to see my colleague, Shaden Khalaf, who is the Senior Director of Public Policy, Government Affairs and Social Impact with Karim, based in the United Arab Emirates, to say a few words. Over to you, please, dear Shaden.
Thank you so much, dear Mirvat, and Ramadan Kareem to everyone. It's an honor to be participating in this panel. And Mirvat, you were just saying that you definitely see that everybody has a role to play. So I'm honored to be sharing the perspective from the private sector, and how public-private partnerships can also be advancing the support to these very dire humanitarian needs that we just heard about from the extensive network of partners and the very sobering realities on the ground. Excuse me. I'm pleased to share with you that Karim, as a company which has been born and has grown in the region, is a company that is very much committed to supporting the communities across the region, which are either affected by crises or individuals who are looking for support in other manners. Karim is very much committed to helping the region prosper, and not only through delivering its own commercial services, but largely through giving back to the community and enabling members of the community to prosper. So Karim has a history of having contributed to campaigns and efforts by the United Nations in the past, and will continue to do so. We also work with local NGOs across the region. And this year in particular, there has been a focus on supporting the efforts in Gaza, given the tragic humanitarian situation on the ground, through a campaign that is called Seeds for Gaza. And through this campaign, we are donating and contributing to supporting the needs as easy as ordering a ride or as ordering a meal on the Karim platform, which is something we're very proud to do. We really see ourselves as creating a digital bridge between people who want to make a difference and who want to contribute and the causes and the needs on the ground in a very seamless, easy, frictionless way, and also responsibilizing individuals to be responsive to the needs across the region and across the world. So we're very pleased to be sharing more updates on this campaign. We will be happy to share how it goes in the future. But just as a reference point, last year, Karim was able to raise $700,000 for humanitarian causes, and this is something that we hope to continue to do. And very much pleased to be collaborating with OCHA and other entities to make people's lives a little bit easier, to support humanitarian relief where we can, and to really support the region in its growth and development trajectory. Thank you so much, Mervat.
Many thanks, Shaden, and great to also hear the perspective and the voice and the work that Karim is doing in the region, and the considerable funds also that were raised in that regard. And we look forward to working closely, Shaden, with you and Karim to contribute more, of course, in terms of our programming in the region and beyond. So colleagues, with that, looking at the chat, I can see there is a question from Ms. Khadija Mutawa. Here her question is focusing on the issue of mental health and psychosocial support. And I would like to turn, of course, because all of our colleagues, our panelists, are seeing this firsthand in the four contexts that we discussed. So I will turn to you to also hear your thoughts about how we're addressing this issue. So her question is, as a peace builder and therapist, I'm concerned about the invisible trauma gap. How is OCHA, and I would expand it, the system, ensuring that mental health support remains a priority in the 2026 budget, even when funding for physical aid is so tight? So before perhaps handing over to our panelists, and I'll go through Shaza, Reza, Hanadi, and Mohanna. Perhaps I'll say a couple of words to give you a few moments to prepare your responses. Mental health and psychosocial support is absolutely a priority. I wouldn't just say just for OCHA, but for the system as a whole. And as a matter of fact, within the Interagency Standing Committee, many of you may know of the Interagency Standing Committee. This is a General Assembly mandated body, which includes not just UN agencies, but NGOs, and they are charged to coordinate humanitarian action globally. There was a fantastic group co-led by WHO, the World Humanitarian Organization, as well as IFRC, the International Federation for the Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement. And they're doing amazing work when it comes to addressing mental health and psychosocial support in crisis. This is an entity that is associated to the ISC, and they have mobilized funds in support of MHPSS in various contexts. Not only this, they also have a team that deploys and supports country teams and clusters to ensure that MHPSS is prioritized in the response. Funding is always a challenge. They are raising funds, but I do not believe that the funding is sufficient. And as you've pointed out, and as you've insinuated in the question, this is going to be a challenge even more so this year and the coming years, given the budget and the funding deficit and the challenges that we're all facing. So again, this is a shout out and a call to our partners online to ensure that funding continues to come through, and also to underscore the importance of prioritizing important interventions such as mental health and psychosocial support, as well as the inclusion of persons with disabilities, as well as protection and gender-based violence, which unfortunately tend to be amongst the lowest funded sectors in the response. So just in terms of warming up the response to this question, but I'm happy to also hand over to Shaza, perhaps first in Sudan, if there are any additional points on the mental health aspect that you'd like to add. Over to you, Shaza.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mervat, and thank you very much for the question. It's a very important and valid question. And I think in the majority of the emergency situation, MHPSS is not seen as a priority. But guess what? In Sudan, currently, we have a technical working group with the support of OCHA and relevant UN agencies like WHO, UNHCR, and our organization, Nada al-Azhar, is one of the founders of this working group. And we have it at national level and at subnational level. So in each and every state now we have the MHPSS technical working group as an entity itself and as a structure whereby it guides all the response in Sudan. And we as NADA also, we co-coordinate and we co-lead this working group in hard-to-reach areas like White Nile. Also, I want to emphasize or to highlight it that OCHA through the Sudan Humanitarian Fund had a dedicated protection allocation. In that allocation, we treat or we deal with the mental health and psychosocial support as a priority and high priority for our operation. So now I think also the awareness of the communities, the awareness of the governments and the humanitarian actors have been raised with regard to MHPSS, but as you correctly stated, still there is a need for expanding and accelerating and focusing more on that. Over.
Many thanks, Shaza. Over to you, please, Dr. Reza.
Sorry, Razi. Razi will be the right name, Razi. Yes, mental health and disability is priority in our healthcare system in Afghanistan, and the core funding, the full funding, or any other donor that they are supporting, like World Bank or Asian Development Bank or other donor that they are supporting the health services. So mental health and MHPSS is part of it. But again, you know that there is a lot of other pressing priorities, and sometimes those pressing priorities is putting shadow on the MHPSS, and we are not having that much accessible interventions, particularly in the emergency situation, like we recently had the earthquake in the country, and at the same time, we had the fighting in such a situation. So in reality, those are the priority. It is very much needed, but such attention is not met. And we are advocating for disability inclusion and for MHPSS and for other protection-related intervention, that it should become stronger, and we should have more resource allocation, and we should have more attention to it. So we are advocating for that one. Currently, it is not, what we want.
Thank you, Dr. Razi, and apologies again for the mix-up with the pronunciation. Over to you, Hanadi, please.
Yes, for us in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, especially in Gaza, because of the severe cases we face due to the war, we have a family center. We have her own family center, which do psychosocial support for the affected families. And we do also referral and case management. So if we found in one of our interventions that these family need psychosocial support, we refer it to the family centers in order to do the case management for them. The fund is limit our work, but we are doing our best to do the referral and also to do referrals to the authorities where they can help also in these issues. Thank you.
Shukran, Hanadi, and Mohanna, if there are any additional points from your end from Yemen.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Actually, the psychological impact for the prolonged crisis such as Yemen, now we are over 10 years, is usually less visible
Thank you, Mohanna, and thanks for adding this particularly important point and aspect around the integration of MHPSS as part of primary healthcare, and even with the role of humanitarians, the issue around mental health and psychosocial support, speaks to the importance of addressing the root causes of conflict and ensuring that the infrastructure, the local infrastructure and institutions are well equipped and capacitated and invested in to ensure that we're able to provide the sustained level of support and attention to address the silent crisis of mental health in context and fragile settings. In crisis and context and fragile settings. Okay, so another question that has come through is around how, it's from Arfan Khan, and the question is, how can we consolidate and communicate the collective reach and impact of humanitarian interventions across contexts? How can we consolidate and communicate the collective reach and impact of humanitarian interventions across contexts? Clearly recognizing the contributions of all partners and presenting aggregated data on overall reach, which can demonstrate the true scale of coordinated action, improve transparency, and reinforce confidence amongst donors and affected communities alike. Great question, and I would say that is, ultimately the bottom line. This is what OCHA's role is. It is about coordinating the response of different actors side by side with local organizations and authorities. It is about communicating how the collective is working together to assess the needs, because of course needs are tremendous, and especially in this current environment of budget constraints and funding constraints, very hard and very difficult decisions have to be made in terms of, from the broad needs, what are the absolute life-saving assistance that needs to be provided to which communities, which parts of the country, which countries. And this is not done alone by one organization for it to be effective. It is bringing, again, the collective authorities, local actors, NGOs, UN agencies, amongst others, to look at the size of the needs and how we can collectively work and address these needs. And that is ultimately what also the global humanitarian overview, and we'll make sure that it's already in the chat box. If it's not there, we'll make sure that it's in there, which was launched on the 8th of December. We do this every year. We launch a global humanitarian overview, which provides a picture of what are the severe humanitarian needs and what is it that we can do as a collective, as a community, to respond to these needs. And attached to this, of course, is the amount of funds that need to be mobilized for the collective to be able to meet these dire needs. For all of you also to be aware, we are at the moment, we've launched a campaign. It's called the 87 Million Lives campaign, because the global humanitarian overview addresses or aims to address the needs of 135 million people across the globe. From within this 135 million vulnerable communities that need assistance, we've identified those who are in severity level 4 and 5, so the absolute severe needs. that are basically points to the need to act today and now to address the needs of 87 million lives. These are the populations that are in need of assistance and protection today. So there is a campaign that was launched at the beginning, in early December of last year, as the Global Humanitarian Overview was launched, to mobilize the required support and financial support to ensure that as a collective we're able to move quickly to respond to these urgent needs. We'll make sure also in the chat box, if you don't have access to it or are not aware of it, there is a system that we manage as OCHA. It's called the Financial Tracking Service. And there you will see which donors, not just, of course, from governments, but also from foundations, from the private sector, both financial and in kind, that have contributed to this 87 Million Lives campaign, calling for $23 billion. And how this assistance is being channeled, to which countries. And this will also be announced in terms of who has stepped forward. On the 11th of March, we will announce who are the donors that have stepped forward early to respond to these urgent needs. So just to mention, there are some tools that are at the disposal. Of course, take a look at the Global Humanitarian Overview, take a look at the Financial Tracking Service, watch the space on the 11th of March in terms of who has stepped forward, and in terms of helping us also communicate more about these needs and how we're responding to the needs. We count on your respective voices to also amplify these messages so that it can travel as far as possible and as needed. Okay, with that, turning, there's a question from Hamed Kharouti. How can pooled funds address the need of youth and adolescents, researchers and analysts? How can the pooled funds address the specific needs of youth, adolescents, researchers and analysts? So also to give our panelists just perhaps a few moments to think through a response. And I will go again do the tour de table for our panelists to respond. Perhaps I will just spend a moment to speak about the critical work that needs to be done. It is happening, but I think we need to do more in terms of amplifying it and making it more clear when it comes to working with and targeting youth and adolescents. I had the privilege of being part of the journey and working on the World Humanitarian Summit. Some of you may have been part of the World Humanitarian Summit that was organized in 2016 in Istanbul. And in the lead up to this World Humanitarian Summit, we held consultations with different stakeholders across the globe. And a critical constituency in the lead up to the World Humanitarian Summit was the engagement with youth. And it was very clear in the engagement with the youth that, again, they are the future. They have, of course, the creativity, the innovation, the energy in terms of thought to think critically and to respond to humanitarian needs in the communities where they come from. But I do believe this is an area that definitely requires a lot more attention, especially in terms of vocalizing and really bringing attention to the work that the youth are carrying out in various contexts around the world. So with that, again, I'll do another tour de table, starting again with Shaza, please, in Sudan, if you have any additional points that you'd like to make here with regards to youth, adolescents, researchers, and analysts. Over to you, Shaza, please.
Thank you very much, Merved. And I think from our side in Sudan, we really find that the response is supporting the youth, and now we start to have a dedicated assigned programming for the youth group, especially the adolescents. Now in all our protection response, we have a dedicated portion of funding going to response to the need of boys and girls and to the youth and youth movement. And I will take an example, a quick one here. Currently I'm in River Nile, where Nadal Azhar has 5 women and girls service spaces, but it also serve as a community centers where we have a comprehensive program during Ramadan for the youth. Like today, after iftar, we're gonna have like a football match where we will disseminate information on social norms and negative coping mechanism for the war, like drugs, as well as the gender-based violence awareness raising messages. But we are using and investing more and more in youth. And I think also all the other UN agencies, apart from the Sudan Humanitarian Fund and the dedicated like assigned or mandated programs for youth, all of them now they start to have like integrated programming and very inclusive to ensure that we have a youth and youth movement in all our programming in Sudan. Over.
Many thanks, Shaza, and good to know that we actually also have, programming targeting youth in Sudan. Dr. Razi, over to you.
In our country, we have different clusters, health clusters, FSAC, health, and also education and WASH, and so on. The study, like they said, research, all the cluster, they are doing their own study through our organization called RICH, and also through other certain mechanism that they are doing. They are gathering a lot of information, and we are developing, annual, the programming, that those the issue, the needs of the children and the adolescent is covered somehow, but as a particular programming that we could have, like their sport and recreation and other, due to other pressing priority that we have, our project is mostly short-term in emergency-oriented project that our full fund is focusing. Because of life-saving intervention is more common nowadays because of the needs in the situation that we have in this country. Otherwise, those are the important areas that we should have a different programming for the youth and adolescent, and at the same time we should also conduct different sort of studies, researches, analyze the program. No doubt that such a thing is happening. But when it's come to the interventions, the intervention is not that much that we should count on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Razi. And over to Hanadi, please.
Yes. The Humanitarian Fund addresses the needs of youth and adolescents through targeted youth and adolescent sensitive programming. The fund relies on age and gender disaggregated data. Sectorial and multi-sectorial assessment identify specific vulnerability needs, adolescents and youth, either in school or the needs of specific wash items for adolescents and gender. And also, we ensure that youth are treated as generic group through the participatory approach. We encourage them through multi-sectorial assessments in order to hear their voice, and also through the complaint and response mechanism where they can give feedback regarding what are their needs. As I said, also regarding specific interventions for them, which includes safe access to their schools, safe space inside their schools, targeted items for them, specifically for adolescents or for the girls. This is what I can say for this. Thank you.
شكرا هنادي. اتفضل مهنا.
Thank you. To complement what my colleague said, we all know that World Fund basically address the urgent humanitarian needs. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't contribute to supporting youth and young professionals. I can think about 3 streams. The first one is that many funded projects include community-based activities. This is where youth and adolescents participants can participate in awareness campaigns, community outreach, and resilience initiatives. The second stream is the humanitarian programs themselves, the projects that in the sectors such as education, protection, livelihood opportunities. This is directly benefiting young people and help them regain stability during crisis. The third channel here is the evidence and learning programming, which see the HNRP, the Humanitarian Need and Response Plan, which depends on very deep research, getting different reports from the clusters, reflecting them on these reports. We can see also how researchers benefit to these reports, how they refer back to those reports in different independent research. So yes, it is directly focused into humanitarian urgent needs, but we can see the opportunities for young engagement, knowledge generation, and longer-term resilience within our communities. Over to you, Mervat.
Thank you. شكرا مهنا. ميرسي قوي قوي قوي قوي. Colleagues, I believe that we've addressed most of the questions. Please feel free if there are other questions that you'd like to present, do include them in the chat box, and we will circle back and respond to them, especially the ones that are specific to OCHA. And I'd like to spend a few moments to wrap up carefully, to wrap up this really, really extremely helpful and important, conversation. And I'd like to take this opportunity to really say a big thank you to Haluk for joining us and for his contribution. I'm not sure if he's still online. If not, the session is recorded. And of course, we will extend a special thank you to him after this webinar. A big thanks, of course, for our colleagues, our communities who are doing tremendous work, responding to other communities that are facing extremely difficult and uncertain circumstances, and supported by colleagues such as Hanadi, Dr. Razi, Shaza, and Mohanna, who are doing tremendous work at the front line, and really demonstrating through this webinar how funds, including through the OCHA managed pool funds, are utilized in a way that ensures dignity, that we respond to the expressed needs of communities, to ensure that it is provided as fast as possible, given again the urgency of the needs, its protection, its life-saving assistance. So it speaks to the urgency of support. So what we heard today are not, of course, abstract discussions. These are real stories from communities. So thanks again to our panelists who brought light or shed light on the individual stories, one of thousands and millions that are on the ground, and from communities that are navigating crises with resilience and courage. So when funding comes late, colleagues and distinguished guests, people pay first with their health, their safety, and their future. This is not a question of whether we know what to do. It is whether we choose to do it. We all have a role to play. We all have a role to play. And the holy month of Ramadan reminds us around the world of the importance of compassion, generosity, and responsibility towards those facing hardship. It is a time when communities come together to extend support beyond their immediate surroundings and reaffirm a shared commitment to humanity. For those who wish to support humanitarian action during this month, we invite you to consider contributing your sadaqah or charitable giving to the humanitarian funds, which support trusted humanitarian partners on the ground. You can do so by scanning the QR code, which is displayed on the screen. And for companies, foundations, or institutions interested in contributing through financial support or in-kind support or technical support and expertise, the OCHA private sector unit would be very pleased to connect with you and give you ideas about how you can do so. And ultimately, humanitarian action is about partnership. Governments, humanitarian organizations, the private sector, the public all have a role to play in ensuring that people affected by crisis receive the assistance and protection they need. All of us are blessed in many ways. And with the blessings, of course, that we have, it is a larger responsibility to make sure that the blessings that we have, that of course we share them, and we share them with those who may not have the same blessings, and make sure that we share it with them to reduce their suffering. During this month of reflection, colleagues and distinguished guests, and a month of generosity, each of us has the opportunity to turn solidarity into action for those who need it most. Thank you once again to our panelists, and thank you all for joining. Ramadan Mubarak, and see you soon, inshallah. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Ramadan Mubarak to everyone.